Hi there, I'm Peter, Managing Director of GlasCurtain. We're a Canadian manufacturer of fiberglass framed curtain wall systems for triple glazed applications. And today we have episode 3 in our curtain wall conversation series, where we talk to industry experts to explore new ideas of what's possible with glazed facades. In this episode, we're talking to Chad Howden. Chad has been in the glazing industry for over a decade and is now the technical director of Blackcomb Facade technology, where he's worked since 2014. Based in Whistler and Vancouver, BC, Blackcomb is a full-service glazing fabricator and installer that carries several leading European brands including MHB, Skyframe, and Ryco. Chad and his team have more passive house experience, project experience, than probably anyone else in the Canadian curtain wall industry, so this is a conversation you won't want to miss. We had a great time chatting with Chad about modeling versus production of cutting-edge systems, the challenge of integrating European components into North American projects, fire rating challenges, energy codes, supply chains, bundling versus unbundling, and so much more. We hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation as much as we did. Chad, thanks very much for joining us for Curtain Wall Conversations episode 3. Yeah, this is going to be fun. I think we have a lot to talk about in the world of construction. So you were saying you just moved to Vancouver now, and because you were in Whistler previously, is that right?
I was, yeah, based out of Whistler for the last been 7 years now, since 2014, when I moved over here from Australia. Yeah, made the move down here, and we Blackcomb also have a division down here, so it was a pretty easy move as far as work wise. But yeah, personal life dictated, so that's here I am.
Okay, and are you guys seeing like a bigger proportion of your work going to in Vancouver area, or are you still primarily up in the Whistler?
It's probably a 50-50 split. Like as far as the size of the company, we have about 40 employees. We have probably 15 of them on the tools down here and about 10 on the tools as far as the ground is concerned in Whistler. So we're seeing a lot larger scale commercial projects down here and a lot more of the complex kind of ground stuff. There is still definitely the high-end market down here for us, but it's not as big of a high-end market as we see in Whistler. So yeah, it's about equal in size between the two divisions for sure. It's
Interesting. Yeah. But you guys you're obviously supplying, at least products beyond. So what is your geographic sort of like coverage area?
So the Pacific Northwest. So as far as Ryco is concerned, we're their exclusive partner within this area. We also do carry other lines, obviously, outside of Ryco as well, being Skyframe, MHB, Skyframe being a high-end sliding door system, high performance, very high aesthetic value in it as well. MHB is a Dutch-made steel window system, family-owned business, like 400 years old, really, really cool system to look at. And then we have a couple of other timber suppliers and a couple of other partners that we use to complement our other systems. But Ryco is the major one. We do a lot of supply only throughout to the US. Kind of our core, what we're really good at is a design engineering, and that's where we add a lot of value to a project. So we add in a lot of that design engineering, and then we manufacture and ship out in a way, a large IKEA kit to a project to be installed. Right. So, so Pacific Northwest, but yeah, we're open to a lot of different areas for sure. Right.
Yeah. That IKEA kit's very similar to what we're doing as well. Right. I mean, we're selling sort of fabricated, knockdown, curtain wall framing kits, and you can ship those anywhere. Right. They don't take up a lot of space, and you can kind of install them wherever they need to be installed. How far east have you guys supplied, because we're getting interest for projects in Ontario. Is there another, actually, excuse me if I forget the answer, or if we've answered this before in our conversations. Is there another Ryco supplier like out east?
There is one that does timber curtain walls exclusively. So they don't do the whole team. So their name is IC2. as well. So they do.
Right. I've heard of them.
They do a little bit of a supply and that sort of stuff over there as well, but they're not as exclusive with their Rayco manufacturing as we are. But they're a great company. They do great work. They provide some great curtain walls. I've seen great work from them. So,
but they're not doing doors. They're not doing operables. They're not doing those other things as well. So much, at least.
Not so much, and as far as I know, not in the Rayco system. And mind you, this may have changed. I haven't spoken to anyone over there in quite some time. So
right.
That may all be different, but yeah.
And in terms of distribution, it's great to see that there is a market. It's great to see that really that there is like a concentration for this kind of market in BC, and to our lens in the rest of the country, and of course we're based in Alberta, but we do lots of projects up in the territories, lots of projects up in Ontario, across the country, and I don't think there's anywhere else in the country that has that kind of concentration of high performance projects. That
not at all, especially with the way that the codes are going here, and you would have seen it in Alberta too. Like your system lends itself so well to those northern projects with the cold climate passive house certification, which is huge. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're the only one with that
so far. Yeah. I mean, it's been almost 3 years, and we're still waiting for one day we're going to check the component database on the Passive House website, and there'll be another. And,
exactly.
And it's funny actually that we're still the only ones, but we're still seeing other manufacturers at least claiming that they can get there. So which is funny, a little bit funny. That they haven't certified to it, but where there's a passive house project actually that we're competing on in Manitoba, cold climate passive house. Is like if you look at the passive house map, it's very clear that the whole province is in the cold climate zone. And there's another European manufacturer, not Rayco, that's claiming that they can get there. But it remains to be seen. And
are they simply just dropping their UG and they're planning to put in quadruple glazed or something in there?
Right? I mean, but I would think that passive house, the whole point of the passive house standard is to protect against that, right? The whole point of because that's sort of the oldest trick in the book. When it comes to improving overall system performance, you just make the frames further apart. And that's kind of been the MO forever, right? And which made sense in a double glazed world, certainly, where the glazing was the weakest link in the thermal envelope. And even in triple glazed, world to a degree, where the framing becomes the weak link. But yeah, it's the whole point of passive house was that it was supposed to be about identifying every single little tiny thermal bridge and eliminating it to the standards required for the climate zone. And so that's sort of how we understood it. And that was the challenge that we rose to in 2017, 2018, 2019, when we were doing the modeling. But yeah, so much of it is being driven by energy step codes. And what do you feel, so maybe coming back to that, how do you feel does it still feel like it's still ratcheting up in BC? Does it still feel like there's, sort of market adoption of every subsequent step? Or are we seeing like we'd seen in other provinces, Ontario most recently, where there was actually kind of a pretty severe watering down of energy codes? And I know the Passive House Canada CEO had written some public letters, sort of publicly shaming some of the public officials in Ontario, at least, that had watered down energy codes. Does it still look like BC is on track to meet its energy targets?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the start of this year, as of the start of this year, everything ramped up again. Anything going for permit now again has to have for a window, a U value of 1.0. And every building must meet, I forget the air change hour. I think we're at 1.5 or 2 air change hours. And even skylights, doors, sliding doors, all of the performance increased to the point where double glazing is now on the way out for sure.
And is that just for residential
Sorry, I was just about to say that part.
Yes.
So
okay.
yes.
Okay. Yes.
So commercial, we're still seeing a bit of double glazing and a bit of triple glazing, kind of teetering between the two right now.
Yeah.
But it's definitely moving in that way. Honestly, I'm installing a lot more triple than I am a lot of any double, realistically.
Sure.
I'm actually thinking of all my current projects right now, and I think I have one double glazed, which is a hospital down in California. So that's not in BC.
Wow. Sure. Fair enough. Fair enough. and so I was going to ask.
I'm definitely seeing it on the ground here for sure.
I was going to ask how you differentiate between the commercial market and the institutional market. Like, are you seeing much difference there between, let's say, like the office space market versus, hospitals, schools, rec centers?
So a lot of what Blackcomb Glass do is very customized. We do a lot of the podium level sort of stuff. We're there for really custom solutions. A lot of the institutional stuff that we're seeing is kind of, for lack of a better word, a cookie cutter type window and curtain wall stuff. That's not the core of our business that we're chasing, unless there's some sort of requirement like we're looking at a couple of projects right now, but because of the thermal performance of our curtain wall system, we can offer double glazed as opposed to triple glazed with any of the alternate solutions. So there's a couple of those instances there, but realistically that custom high end market is what we're after, even within the commercial world. So like right now, a couple of my projects are the Butterfly downtown on the corner of Nelson and Burrard, most expensive building in Canada right now. Correct. Yeah. Yes. So I'm doing the pool around there. So, there's quite a lot of podium level work there, but the pool has bent mullions and curved glass. Flyby glazing has to be super high performance because they don't want this entire thing drenched in condensation every morning. Being inside of a pool, it's basically a 5-sided box, right? So, so that kind of area is where we really excel. And we can really offer solutions and help out with areas there. So the institutional market is not something that we've really explored and started pushing towards. Of course, if they have something complex and, the entryways, I'm thinking schools right now. There's a lot of beautiful schools out there with a lot of beautiful entrances and canopies and this sort of stuff now. And I'm starting to think maybe I should be doing more of this sort of stuff.
For
but
sure.
It's not something that we've chased after a lot of at this stage. So.
Yeah, and I mean, our systems could work well together on a lot of those kinds of projects because that's mostly what we're in the market for is institutional work. But of course, we don't do skylights. We don't do some of those other sort of canopies and things like that, or curved facades. Our systems are always very geometric just because of one of the limitations of fiberglass. One of the limitations of fiberglass is that new dyes are not just, they can just take time, they're very expensive. They're about an order of magnitude more expensive than an aluminum dye. So if you need something custom, it adds up very quickly.
For sure.
And in the amount of engineering and testing and it's a composite material, right? We have to do all the modeling and all the testing every time we do a new dye. So it's a big undertaking. But that's what we did for our passive house system, was a new dye. But it means that we sort of have like two dye shapes. Right. It's like you've got a 6-inch back section and a 10-inch back section. It's like, how big do you want to go? But it always ends up being pretty geometric. And but it's like it's incredible how long it actually takes to bring these systems to production. It's like right. It's one thing to just model it.
Well, that's the thing that I've known as well. I think I know this was true about a year ago, and I may be incorrect now, but I know that the top 3 performing curtain wall systems in the mold climate that I'm in down here, none of them had ever been created before. The dyes haven't even been made. It's just purely modeling on those systems. So, availability of product is a huge thing, obviously, because as I'm sure everyone's aware.
And that's even, without a world of crazy supply chains. Never mind the world of crazy supply chains. And that actually was a challenge for us too when we were getting our dyes cut, our fiberglass dyes cut. It took 2 or 3 times longer than it would have taken normally to get our dyes cut. Because fiberglass dyes are a very specialized thing. It's not like aluminum dyes. They're not as much of a commodity. There's not as many people in the world who are doing it. And so there's only a handful of players who are doing it. And yeah, instead of taking, 4 months, it took a year or something, which was fine because it was, during the thick of COVID, right? And the whole world was slowed down anyways. And I think it had more to do with shipping than it did with anything else. I'm sure that time would be shorter now, but still it takes a long time to go from the modeling and certification phase to production, and then to get even your basic standards of testing, because you have to test this new system to the air, wind, ASTM E238, ASTM E331 for curtain walls, which are the air and the water penetration, condensation. Then, for us, we also do fire testing again.
And we do a lot of custom projects. So then even the PMU on the project specific application, And now I'm doing the Museum of Anthropology out there, and even though we're using a certified system, it's a double glazed bent skylight system, right? Which no one has their ASTM test on, obviously, because there's not a huge market for something like that. So that's my current problem right now, is the PMU testing for that. Not a problem.
No, it's a thing to do, but it's another certification, right? And it's kind of crazy, how many and it's sort of like a blessing and a curse, right? The amount of certifications that are needed for all these things, because if you get the certifications, you made this huge investment, great, you have this moat, right? You have this moat around your business where anyone else who wanted to, come and try and do that has to do those tests first. And that takes time and energy. And a lot of those things you can't fast track. You can't fast track testing. It just takes a certain amount of time.
It does, yeah. And I mean, to a certain degree, a lot of what I'm seeing around the world right now is it's limiting product availability. Right, so there's all of these high performance products. We know they're available in Europe, and on a lot of things, I'm seeing, for very simple specification reasons, the product alternatives from Europe being thrown out, and basically leaving installers and fabricators with no one to go to because there's nothing there. Something as simple as a different anodizing class between Europe and here, right? There's some consultants that are able to look at the test between two and use their judgment to say, yes, these are unequal. Or there is a slight variance here, and fair enough, that there are variances between the two testing systems. But, coding's a big one. Coding I see a lot of, and especially providing warranty. No one wants to be that sort of pilot person. But then you turn into, how do you get pre-manufactured product over from Europe, especially a pre-glazed window or something like that that's going to go into multifamily residential home, they're coding, it has to be coded in Europe. So that means they're coding to those standards over there. So how do we get that product over here? So, the codes are pushing forward, but the specifications need to be able to catch up, and the alternates need to be available. And it's really up to the consultants to know what those alternatives are. I know a lot of them myself now, just because I've had to read into them to help explain to multiple consultants the differences in all of these, and coding, fire rating. There's time and time over again. There's hundreds of these. So,
and that's what we're seeing as well on, passive house. I would say mostly on passive house projects where we're seeing that. That's the sort of space that's creating the most demand around European products, right? Because it sounds, and obviously we're sort of world leaders in passive house performance, so we're obviously pro, passive house bulls, as it were. We're pro passive house, but at the same time, it's very odd and very strange, and it's kind of strangely sexy and seductive to bring this European standard over to Canada, and then and then the rubber hits the road, and then we're like, oh, well, wait a minute, we don't have, as we've talked before about, the panic hardware on the doors. It's what do we do? It's well, it only meets this DIN standard, and we need it to meet this UL standard, and, never the twain shall meet. And somehow someone has to figure out who's going to pay for this, $50,000 test, $100,000 test for 3 doors or something like that. And it's who's going to do that on any kind of project?
No, exactly. And it's that one's a perfect example of something that can get very misconstrued. So the difference between the North American and the European testing on those panic bars themselves there is the North American has an elevated temperature. requirement to the test that the European doesn't. So when you're talking about putting these doors into an application where there is no fire rating on the door, there is no reason for an elevated temperature on that door. Like you need to take things with a grain of common sense here and say, yes, this is applicable here or not. And that's not for me to decide. That's for the jurisdiction and for the ownership to decide themselves, right? So, as a manufacturer, all I can do is say, here's what's available to you. Like, you know what I mean? It's yeah.
And you're lucky when you get, forward-thinking jurisdictions. And I shouldn't say lucky. I should say the situation resolves itself the most quickly and the most easily when you have a forward-thinking jurisdiction like you had at the Clayton Community Center, for example, where they know they need ultra-high performance. Yes, if this door meets, this slightly different standard versus this slightly different standard, okay, no one's life is at risk in doing this. Obviously, this is used. It's far from it. Right? That's
the thing. These things have been installed for years and years and years. These standards have been applicable in Europe for as long as the panic bars have been around and been a thing, right? Like it's not like we're trying to put anything that's terrible out there. I would be the last person that wouldn't do my own due diligence in putting something into a building like that. So. It takes a moment of common sense, and it's going through this transition, and especially in Vancouver right now, with the way the codes are actually catching up, and they're starting to catch up to the passive house performance levels. You know what I mean? They're actually kind of close now. So it's going to take this grain of common sense, and from an owner's standpoint, selecting an envelope consultant or a hardware consultant that has that grain of common sense can mean the difference between their project being a success or a failure at the end of the day, and whether they're going to get that passive house certification or not. It's really about being able to put in the work up front and figure out these issues up front, make sure everyone's clear, put the options on the table, and this is what we're doing. Is this acceptable to everybody? So
And it really does, it really has to be that meeting of like the top down sort of regulatory framework and the bottom up sort of market demand for these kinds of buildings. And, because we're talking to, folks out in Ontario on some passive house projects, and they want to do, decently like large, what are they? 6-story, 10-story, multifamily residential to passive house standard. And they're going to need these, the kind of exit doors with panic bars. And when we sort of mention in passing that they might want to talk to the authority having jurisdiction about having this accommodated, they're like, there's no way, like hell will freeze over before these authorities having jurisdiction will make that common sense, as you called it, accommodation, because so many jurisdictions are just being black and white, trying to marry these old school rules with these new school frameworks for energy, and the solutions for so much of this new school energy framework are coming with their own set of rules, and they don't always perfectly link up.
No, and I think they're right to be cautious of it, in the fact that like we are talking about in this particular instance, a panic bar, there's a life safety situation. So it's not something to be taken lightly that this is an alternate there. But for someone to throw it out without even a thought is going to become a bigger and bigger issue the longer and longer this goes on. So I guess all we can ask for as a fabricator is that people do, look at things in an overall sense of what it is. And I mean, even fire rating. Fire rating is another big one as well. I'm looking at a project right now it got its permit out this year, and there's an entire wall of the facade that needs to be a fire rated facade simply because it's so close to the building next door. Which means a full fire rated, I think a 1 hour fire rated curtain wall there. But there's nothing that can be done in anything larger than a double glazed system. as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
But anything larger than that double glazed system is never going to get a performance value that's going to be equal and satisfy the new codes that came in at the start of this year. So that in itself has its own complication, and whether they need to change the architecture and move it away. These are some large scale moves to simply to satisfy these fire rating codes. And I don't know much about the fire rating on your curtain wall, but I know you have been through it, so you can probably enlighten me as to how much the fire rating tests are. But I know Rayco recently went through it in their European certification of their steel systems for their fire rated systems and doors over there, and it is no small feat to go through a fire rated system like that. So these kind of accommodations between which of the two is going to take precedence here. Right. Unless you're going to tell me that you have a solution.
Yeah, I mean, the ratings are a funny thing because, you mentioned 1 hour fire ratings, and we get that question, come up as well. It's like, so how long is the time? What is the time rating? Is it a 45 minute? Is it a 60 minute? Is it 90 minute for, people will hear that we passed, fire test or flame spread test or what have you. But the test that at least is most applicable for fiberglass frame curtain wall is an exterior flame spread test. That's a pass-fail test. And in Canada, it's CANULC S134. And the idea is that you sort of have like this, 3-story assembly, and at the bottom of it, you have fire coming out and going on the outside of the building. The fire is not really designed to go in behind so much as it's designed to go on the outside. We're now about to test to the NFPA 285, which is the American equivalent, which is a little bit different. And there is an opportunity for fire to come. The fire has to punch through a window first. So you actually have to glaze. And so and then there's ASTM E2307, which is, again, somewhat related, and apparently is now actually being incorporated into the National Building Code of Canada for 2020. Which will then get adopted in however many years it takes to get adopted at the provincial level. But there's those, as far as I understand, those are all pass-fail tests. So I don't know that, as far as I understand, like fiberglass curtain wall wouldn't replace a rating or a system that requires like a 1 hour rating or something like that. So but my understanding is also that it has to do with proximity and height of buildings as well. So it's really about protecting the occupant inside of the building when the building in subsequent floors. Yes, so that's right. So it's about protecting the floors above, so on multi-story buildings, and about protecting neighboring buildings. And so my understanding is that those tests, at least in Canada, the ASTM E2307 and CANULC S134 are applicable to those type of scenarios. Certainly the CANULC, I'm still learning more about the ASTM one, but the NFPA is the American equivalent of that as well, which we don't use in Canada, but as we are seeing more interest for ultra high performance in various parts of the codes are pushing hard in the States too, right? Massachusetts is talking about net zero. Certainly the Cascadia region, the Pacific Northwest is talking about, net zero buildings and zero energy buildings. And so there's definitely pockets of the United States that are pushing hard, and they also need solutions. And they're like, okay, what's on this continent, right? What doesn't have to come from overseas? And our name shows up on a database. But the fire codes considerations are definitely one that can be a challenge depending on the actual design of the building. Yeah, but I mean, coming back to doors and other sort of components and things, it's making this last the conversations that we've been having recently is also bringing to light how interconnected all of these components are. I mean, we made a strategic choice a decade plus ago to just focus on curtain wall, and when we look out there at the current landscape, there's not really any other companies that are just doing curtain wall, right? They always have those door packages, they always have those window packages or the operables, And we're finding, like, for the past projects that we're consulting on, that we're bidding, we're having to include those in our packages. The specialized glass, there might be your doors, the Ryco doors, there might be operables from Cascadia. And we're having to bundle everything together because, a small glazer in Northern Ontario or in Prince George, BC, or what have you, doesn't have the network, right, to source everything in a 2-week tender.
No, exactly.
And it ends up that
completing that glazing package it's a huge component of this, and it can be a limiting factor with everything going so far forward. Like I'm lucky enough to be working with Ryco, where we have timber, steel, aluminum, skylights, operable vents, operable skylights, like sliding doors, like. And all of these passive house certified, right? So we can complete the package pretty easily with those. But we were working with Ryco for a very long time, and even so, we still found that we needed alternate suppliers in Skyframe, in MHB, to help complete these glazing packages and be able to put everything together. It's not an easy thing to do, to put all of this stuff into a single package. And then, especially when you're going for your PHPP, putting every single UF value, every single UG, thermally modeling, every single thermal bridge, every single SCI installed value, it adds up a lot very fast. So it's the difference between getting a bid together and not getting a bid together in time, right? Because if you're a glazer in an area where you might see a passive house project, once every couple of years, maybe, one passive house opportunity, the chance that you're going to even know who to call and be able to get all the numbers and all the information you need and come up to speed on the language, and all the all of the vocabulary of all this stuff is limited, and it's a shame when you have product opportunities and then no one to bid these things and so we're finding that just as a service, not that we set out to be a fully integrated manufacturer, and we're not about to start manufacturing doors, we're not about to start manufacturing operables, but it is kind of a funny twist of fate that it ends up being that we end up needing to supply these things just to make sure that the project stays on track and stays competitive. Well, yeah, and even coming down to the schedule component of a lot of these as well, right? So there's us manufacturing here in North America as well has that huge advantage that we don't need to know the exact sizes at that tender size. We can adjust here slightly. You're not ordering a window package from Europe and it comes here. So same as what we do on all of our projects, where we order our stock lengths and we order large scale materials to our shop here, and then we hold them in stock until such a time that we have either site measurements or confirmed sizing from the GC, and then it runs through the store and it's very quick to get its way out to site. So eliminating that schedule implication and those general conditions that a GC is going to see and incur on any project simply because they're waiting for a European system. It's a huge component of making sure that this movement towards the higher performance is going to continue and not cost an owner an arm and a leg to do, because it can have huge financial implications to not have your material ready to go and get installed when you need it installed, or having to pre-confirm things earlier, and then for whatever reason there was some miscommunication and now we're redoing all of the openings for our windows, right?
Yeah, and you and I, or I should say Ryco and GlasCurtain at least, we're already at the premium end of the market, right? We're already it's already a challenge on most projects for us to be incorporated for the most part. Like there's more demand than there is oftentimes budget, right? Not every project has the budget to do the performance. To
some degree, like I've found when we're talking equals to say a Cornier system or something like that, the Ryco curtain wall that we have can be competitive with Cornier. Like I've won bids against Cornier before. And it won't be the last time. So, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of aluminum sticks that go together, and you do see, and where we do see the increase is in the operable units, the doors, the vents, but they have realistic implications. So my doors, you can do a water test on the door. You can do a smoke test on the doors. I would challenge you to go downtown and do that on any other storefront door that's sitting there,
No.
where it's basically a mohair that's holding this thing together, right? And that was fine, and it worked, and it kept the doors dry. It's, you know, you're not seeing wind-driven rain go through and everything like that. But now we're talking about the air change hours having an impact, and it's not only in the passive house world, it's now a code requirement of the city of Vancouver, and it's going to grow outside of Vancouver as well. So, you know, there's a reason for the upgrading cost that you're seeing there.
Speaking of, you'd mentioned, you know, supply, like bringing in sticks from Europe is much easier than obviously bringing assembled units. How are you finding the current supply chain environment compared to 6 months ago, compared to 6 years ago? Yeah,
so compared to pre-COVID, there's definitely some alternate challenges that we're seeing right now, mostly just on the pricing front. Material availability hasn't been a huge issue for us. It's always been available from Europe. It's just a matter of getting it here, and it's just the delays that we have to deal with. You know, the putting stuff on a boat right now is an absolute crapshoot as to when it'll get here, right? You know, we're starting to see it settle down a little bit now, but especially in the height of COVID there, things took a lot longer and they cost a lot more to ship across the ocean. So, but I think a lot of this is due to the fact that we do manufacture here locally. So we try to get involved very early on, and I think it's incredibly important that we get involved very early on so that we can start to look at the schedule ahead and say, hey guys, this is the time to make these decisions, and then we're going to put this on a boat. We may be 2 weeks ahead of time where we need to be, but if there's a delay on the water, you know, these boats usually have to stop at multiple ports. Sometimes those ports are busy and it has to stay there for a few weeks, right? So sorry, I lost my where I was going there, but
just supply chains today compared to, you know, the last 6 months or a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so getting that aluminum and that sort of stuff over here is definitely one challenge. The biggest thing is the price increases, and these ones are definitely a hard one because, you know, none of my suppliers are realistically holding prices on anything for longer than 30 days. So for me to send in a bid where, you know, I had to get the quote a week before I send in the bid, and then they're asking me to, you know, hold my price for 60 days. And then when I win the project, I go back to the manufacturer and go, oops, sorry, it's 20% higher. And I'm not going into the project where I'm now losing money to begin with, right? So that's probably been the hardest part that we've seen is trying to confirm and hold pricing for longer than, you know, 30 days. And I've seen some of my competitors are holding for no longer than 10 to 15 days right now for their pricing.
Well, and the steel guys are holding it for 1 day.
Price. Yeah, no. Steel's the museum event anthropology, the skylights that we're doing there are all steel, like pre-manufactured skylights. It's that one's definitely been a challenge in on itself, you know, and even coating, you know, I forget which component it was, but there was a specific component in the powder resin that basically just went missing. It couldn't be found anywhere. So any custom powder was basically, you know, 4 to 5 months away. So it's very small things that we're seeing here and there. And generally we're able to negotiate them and, you know, with very minimal cost impact to our clients or very minimal impact at all to the clients, to be honest. You know, the one thing we've tried to hold through all of this is to hold true to what we've given and to our customers, and try to lay them out where our challenges are and what those challenges are. And what we're finding, because the entire world is in disarray right now, if we outline those early enough and well enough to our clients, they do seem to understand and get where it is and what the risks are. And that's pretty much it. Ultimately, it's come down to communication. And, you know, as long as you can communicate the constraints well enough that both you and the client or the builder or whoever it may be that you're working with understand where things can potentially change, and that it's not always the manufacturer's fault. And it's no one's trying to cash grab in all of this. Everyone's just trying to make their way through it all.
That's right. We're trying to, we all want to, at the end of the day, we all want to build, right?
Exactly.
It's plus or minus a couple bucks, here and there. Those, the money will come and go, but we all want to build something, and that's what we're seeing. That's what's still happening, but projects are just taking a little bit longer. It feels like to construct as well, because there's just all of these disruptions that aren't affecting necessarily your scope or my scope, but there's initial sort of schedules, whether it's challenges with permitting or challenges with just other materials in the supply chain and the structure's not ready. So it's like, instead of being on site in March, of this year, it's all of a sudden it's December. And so, we're seeing bigger pushes in schedules, but things are still happening. Things are still getting built. And you're right. You're so right about the importance of communicating some of the risks of this, as soon as possible, so that there are no surprises, 6 months when you're having to be on site 6 months later than you thought you were.
Exactly. You can't cross your fingers behind your back and hope everything's going to go right. You have to put it out on the table. And as much as sometimes GCs just want to hear the short answer of yes, it's on order, you have to keep communicating, yes, it's on order, but there's, that 8 to 10 week lead time is now 8 to 12, and it's actually a guesstimate between any of those dates. It's not like I'm getting 8 weeks and I'm telling you 12.
Right.
There really is a variable in all of this stuff, for sure. Yeah,
very much so. Collaboration versus, competition in the industry. It's, to what extent, is Ryco competing with GlasCurtain? To what extent are we collaborating with one another? To what extent are we competing? Well, maybe we're all competing with Conair, but I tease, because we'll use Conair doors on lots of our projects too. That's they're a perfectly.
I mean, if any of us want to buy Conair, I'm pretty sure they're not going to say no to us, right?
Of course, no. They're here to sell products too. But yeah, I think that. I think that there's an impression in this industry that we're all trying that everything's so super cutthroat, and everyone's trying to, everyone's out to get each other. And once in a while there's definitely less than wonderful behavior. But I would say that generally my experience in the industry the last almost decade now has been really positive, in terms of people looking to work with each other. And curious on your impression as well in the time you've been here.
What I'm finding is a lot of the new age construction here is a lot more collaborative with it. I think a lot more manufacturers these days are trying not to be everything to everybody. Understand where your strengths are, and as long as you stick to those, everything is going to happen. There's a lot of constraints out there, especially with COVID. And if we all know what we're good at. We all know how to do it, and we all do what we do very well. There's a reason we're still in business. So I think everyone wanting to stick to their core foundation is what's really pulling us through a lot of this at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. No, that's so true, and that's that's room for optimism in the space ahead as we move to higher and higher performance buildings. There's definitely going to be, we're definitely going to need more collaboration together, because we're all trying to figure out so much, for the first time. And, you might only have to figure out, for the first time once in one jurisdiction, but then we can apply those lessons learned to other jurisdictions. And slowly we can get this whole country, over the course of our career, certainly. I mean, we have a few years ahead of us, but one project at a time, and we can build something.
No, exactly. And I think it all starts with the movement towards the codes, like the BC's Energy Step Code. I'm completely mind blanking, but New York has a very similar adaptation of the system down there. So we're seeing a lot of that down there. And it realistically starts with the movement of that. You know, there is incremental cost to this at the end of the day. And I think the industry has been in this cutthroat market of going at each other and everyone chasing everyone to the bottom dollar. And until the codes change, I can't see that changing and that mentality changing there as well. You know, it's one thing that the increase in these codes does is it makes everybody in this industry accountable for what they do. And realistically, that's the perfect reason for this collaboration, is that you need to know what you're doing before you can get into the market, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that another thing the codes do, you know, sort of building off that is open minds, right? Like we're seeing in the design community a lot more openness to new products, new ideas. And then a lot of that, you know, collaboration is happening earlier because, you know, instead of us being viewed as sort of, and I see us as, you know, sort of like product manufacturers broadly or fabricators broadly, instead of us being, you know, a commodity product where we're all racing to the bottom, we have knowledge, we have experience, we have value, we have a certain quality that, you know, helps achieve architectural ambitions or aesthetic ideals or what have you. And I think it's great to be part of the design process, instead of just sitting, you know, throwing numbers at the wall all the time. We get to actually be much more engaged.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you the amount of times where I go to bid a project and you can tell day by day that there's been no involvement early on from a trade because there's all sorts of conflicts and all sorts of things that don't work. And, you know, that's the kind of project that I'm going to steer away from, right?
Right.
You know, that early collaboration and the confidence in what there is. So at the end of the day, when we do these early designs and these early collaborations, you know, I feel safer going in at a lower number. You know, I don't have the unknowns on the project anymore. So realistically, the ownership in the client at the end of the day is probably getting a better product at a cheaper price than they would have if they just put this out for bid. So it's a funny way to look at it, the front loading of this whole system and the way that it actually saves you at the end of the day. So, you know, it does take someone within the industry to see the value in it, for sure. But I think with what we're seeing and some of the projects that I've brought to realization, it's more than true. It's more than true, and it's repeating itself over and over and over again. So.
Yeah, there's opportunity to sort of have our cake and eat it too, right? It's
exactly.
it's not just that we get a better performing product; it's that we get one at a more, you know, competitive in a more competitive way, I guess, as well. So
no, exactly.
It's been a pleasure having you on. You know, just to chat, right? I mean, just to sort of open up these conversations to the world. I think there's a lot here, right? And there's a lot sort of that goes on behind the scenes in our worlds. And I think, you know, as guys like you and I become subject matter experts, hopefully this sort of opens up the doors for other people to sort of see what's going on and see what it's like at the leading edge, right? Because we're trying things before, you know, a lot of architects or clients are trying things in other parts of the country, or, you know, the continent even. Yeah. And hopefully we can use this platform to spread even further.
Yeah, no, 100%. I love the idea, and I'm a bit jealous that you came up with it before me.
Well, appreciate that very much, and yeah, we will sign off there. Thanks very much.
So there you have it, our third episode of Curtain Wall Conversations featuring Chad Howden. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at GlasCurtain to stay up to date on new episodes of this great series. Also be sure to check out our Spotify and Apple podcast accounts where this episode and others are now available. If you have any questions about our conversation today or fiberglass framed curtain wall in general, feel free to reach out to us by email at info@glasscurtain.ca. You can also subscribe to our blog for all the latest updates, which we'll link to in the description below. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.